Okay, so I'm going to be giving a tutorial in GameMaker Studio 2. We are doing it entirely in GML. We are not doing any drag and drop. I'm not going to go into too much detail on everything. This is going to be a basic video where I give you a quick skimming over every main feature that GameMaker provides. If you want, just go open a file, click New Project, and then select GML language, and you should see this. So, we're going to make a basic little platformer here. We are going to make so a sprite. This contains your images, your PNGs, your GIFs, all of your art style, everything that's going to be rendered to the screen. You throw it in here. And let's make a new one. It has a sprite editor built into the engine, but it's probably better to use a third party if you want some high quality stuff, and then drag it in. Out of convention, you always start your sprites off with SPR underscore. We'll do snake case SPR, and let's call this our guy. So let's do sprite guy, and let's make him 30. Let's see, what should the size of it be? Let's make our guy 32 by 32. Perfect. And then we'll set our origin, which is important for later on, to middle center. So later on, when we actually make an object, and then we kind of bind it to the sprite, you'll be able to use like self.x and self.y to indicate like my x and y coordinates. And when your object refers to its own x and y coordinates, it'll actually be talking about the origin of the sprite it is bounded to. So usually for simplicity's sake, you would do a middle center. Okay, let's edit this image, and let's just make our guy a black square. Let's see. Yeah, there we go. Okay, let's save that. Close that out. Sprite guy. Okay, he's centered. Bingo. So we can close that. So we have our guy. Cool. Tile sets. This is, it's for the sake of rendering processes later, so it's pretty much, it's like sprites, but if you have, it's a tile set. So if you ever have like a repeating background that'll be, constantly rendering, it's better to just throw it in here because there's a slightly different functionality for how you can put it in the background. So we're not going to really be covering that. I don't use them too often. I don't make a whole lot of like scrolling backgrounds or something. But yeah, I may cover that in a later video. Then we have sounds. This one's pretty basic. You create a sound, and then you load in, you name it, then you load in a sound file. But yeah, you literally just load in a sound file. It takes all sorts of extension types. You name it, and it's always good convention to call it, sound, SD underscore, and then, we'll call it main music, something like that. And then you load in the file, and these are different types of storages. If it's uncompressed, it's actually encrypted into the exe file. It's actually like included in your executable, but it makes your game huge. And but on the bright side, it's uncompressed, so it's clean, it's crisp, it's untampered. While compressed, it drastically reduces the size, but it may be a little scratchy here and there because it was compressed, and it's typically lossy. And then if you know a bit more, you can tinker around here. So there's our sound. We didn't actually load in anything. Paths, this is for if you actually want to make like primarily a single player game or something, and you want to kind of hard code like little scenes, and you want your NPC to like walk along this little path, say some text, and then walk along this little path like off screen. That would be done here. So if you kind of want to hard code little scenarios, little paths, I don't use those too much. I primarily make multiplayer games like Tiny Kingdoms, where there's not a whole lot of like pre-scripted modules that we use. So I'm gonna skip that one for now. Scripts are what you would call in another language like functions. Yeah, that's a better way to say that. So it's pretty much a function. So there's nothing too complicated about them. I'll come back to this a little more in a minute when we go to objects, because objects, they have a bunch of logic inside of them, and you can use scripts to clean that up and make it look a little more legible, a little more professional. Shaders, I'm going to skip that for now. It's a bit of a complicated topic. Fonts, this is where you can literally, load in your own fonts that will actually be included in the exe, so the person running the game won't have to actually have your font installed. So it'll include the font in the executable. And so you can customize your own font or edit one that already exists, and then change the size, make it italic, bold, and then later on, if you need to draw text, you can dynamically select one of the fonts that you have pre-made. Timelines, I don't really touch these. I haven't touched these before. Don't know a whole lot about them. Feel free to look them up on your own, but I've never needed them for anything. Yeah. Then objects. Okay, so this is actually the meat and potatoes of like the entire engine. So we're gonna create an object here, and so what's gonna happen is let's call him obj for object, and then let's call him guy, and then we're gonna assign him his sprite, which is sprite guy. Cool. So now he's been binded to that. So now we have events. So the only ones you should ever really touch, I would say, are asynchronous for if you are building a multiplayer game. And then I would also do draw. You might need alarm, step, and destroy. So, now you probably don't even need destroy. Yeah. So, what's going to happen is a lot of these are a little more they kind of linger towards drag and droppy. They're kind of a midway in between. So what happens is, like, for example, step. So step is something that happens every frame in the game. So when you set the game to run at 60 frames per second, that means every 1/60th of a second, the logic in the step event will be executed. Let's see. There's also, and create. So create. This is like, you initialize your local variables. So, if I have my guy here, I would set his health. I would, let's see, set, his maximum height that he can jump, or something like that. You initialize all of your variables. This is something that happens every frame. Draw. If you want your person to somehow dynamically draw like a health bar or some text or something like that, that has to go in the draw event or it actually won't render to the screen. And then see these other things like mouse and key down and key press and all this stuff. These can actually, in 1 or 2 lines, can be facilitated in step. So I wouldn't bother messing with these, honestly. They just overcomplicate how many events you have going here. But let's see. Even collision, it's better to it might be a little difficult at first, but it's better to make your own collision logic. And then, like I said, asynchronous does need to be its own event because that asynchronously handles. That's not like a per frame thing. That's just it takes it as it comes, and that's what asynchronous means. And it's mainly for networking because you don't know how fast packets will travel between client and server. So let's see here. So before we do that, so let's have a guy and let's have a ground, like just a ground tile. So let's call it sprite ground. Let's also make that 32 by 32. Cool. And we will also center this. And then we will make this, let's make this like a dark, maybe let's make it red. This will be just our ground. Oh, like a violet. Okay. So that's sprite ground. And then we will make object ground. And then we will assign it to sprite ground. Okay. So when, yeah, and now you're probably wondering how do we actually get things to pop up. So what's happening is in rooms, so the game automatically loads you into the first room you have in the list. So there's always going to be a room 0. So this is where you can more or less drag and drop. How do I turn off this little grid system? Let's see. Yeah, okay, cool. So you can more or less drag and drop, things in here. So let's go ahead and just... Oh, my bad. You have to drag it in on this one. It's changed. I wonder if I can make it snap to the grid without showing the grid. Okay, I guess not. So we'll just drag a few of these out here. So these are our ground objects. I also wonder what color I can make the background. Let's make it white, just so we can see our main character. There we go. Whoop. And then let's drag that back in. So let's just make ourselves a little platform here. Cool, and then let's drag our guy in here. Cool. Okay, so this is our room. So just right off the bat, as soon as we click play, our game will instantly take us to room 0. We could rename that if we want. Out of convention, you see how we do OBJ and SPR. Let's rename this to RM beginning. So this is our beginning room. Now, let's just click play. Okay, so here we are. Here's our client. We have no logic. Nothing's happening. Just our objects are being rendered to the screen. So let's close that. So let's go back to our guy logic. Okay, so now let's say, now let's check. So when we press step, so let's see here. So let's have it where if VK... Oh yeah, it's keyboard. If keyboard key. What is it? Is it ORD? Yeah, it is. If keyboard key ORD A. Let's see. Did I set that up right? Oh, my bad, not keyboard key. Keyboard check, my bad. If keyboard check ORD A, so if we're holding the A key, every step will move left 1 pixel. So every second he'll move 60 pixels to the left. And here we're doing if keyboard check ORD. So what's happening here is this wants an ASCII value, and this function turns the letter A into the corresponding ASCII value. So that's what's happening here. And then let's see. And then we'll say if. No, we'll just go ahead. We'll go ahead and make this its own if, so that if you're holding both, it will. Oh, what's another one? Okay, so if keyboard check or this one's a little tricky. Let's give him three different states. Okay, so let's say when his first state is grounded. So your guy's grounded at first, but let's say the 3 states are grounded and rising and falling. So these are like finite state machines, right? So right when the game starts, he's grounded. So we go to our state event. And so we're saying, okay, if you press the spacebar, grounded, or state equals rising. No, but only if, so, my bad. So if state equals grounded. So if he's grounded. So if you press space and he's grounded, he'll rise instead. So what happens? So he's rising. And what happens is we'll call it rise timer. Or rise countdown. Equals, so let's say 20. We'll just see there. We'll say 20, rise counter. Okay, so it's happening. And then, so it's gonna, what happens is we now say, hey, you're going to start rising. And we're going to set a little counter here, a number that we're going to decrement from. And then what we're going to do is if rise countdown is greater than 0, we're gonna decrement it, and then we're also going to make him rise. So this is essentially him jumping. So this is essentially jump logic. So we're going to press space, and if he's grounded, we're now going to rise. And now we set a rise counter for how long he's going to rise. And then this is logic for like, okay, the rise counter, it's been set here, so now it's going to be checked. If it's greater than 0, it's going to be decremented, and he's going to go up. And then, so this is after he's risen. So this is when that's false. So once the rise counter has been decremented to 0, his state is, what did I call it? Did I call it falling? Yeah. His state is going to become falling. Okay, and what we're going to say is if state equals falling, what we're going to do is we're going to check. We're going to say self.y plus equals 1. So when you so I forgot to mention why this might not make any sense. Plus and minus is that your logic, your coordinate system starts in the upper left. So that's positive x, and positive x is actually down. Yeah, so it's kind of flipped. So just know that minusing from x or y brings you more and more and more into the corner. So plussing x goes to the right and plussing y goes down. So when you're falling, we're adding downwards. I know that's kind of confusing. So, yeah. So we're going to add, so if he's falling, we're going to add 1 to his y. And then if, what's the actual, if place meeting. And then what we're going to say is self plus x, self plus y, plus 1, object ground. Whoop. Okay. So what's happening here is, this should be, oh my bad, this is, okay. So this is to make you jump. If you press space and you are currently grounded, you will begin to rise, and it will set your rise counter. And this is essentially for how many frames you will go up. And then this is, as it's decrementing that counter, you are ascending upwards. And then once it's done counting, you begin to fall. And if you're falling, you begin to go downwards. But then, what's happening is only if you keep falling until it realizes you're about to collide with the ground. So your collision box is actually your sprite canvas. So 32 by 32, we filled it in so it'll be perfectly. So what happens is that if there's any black that overlaps the pink, so what it'll do is it'll go ahead and say, hey, take my X, take my Y, and add 1 pixel downwards, and if I'm colliding with this, return true. So if that's true, we're like, hey man, stop falling, you're now grounded. So I'm going to be surprised if this works all in the first go, but it looks correct. So let's see if this will work. Yeah, so if rise countdown, not set before reading. Oh, my bad, because there's an if there, and it's, yeah, my bad. So that's something we need to set here. And we'll just set it to 0, yeah. So he doesn't keep falling. Okay, so that is happening. That is happening. Okay, so he's falling slowly. So he's grounded. Yeah, that's a lot better. Okay, so we have it for if he's grounded, if he's rising, if he's falling. Okay, that looks a lot cleaner. Hey! Looky there. And then we fell off. Okay, I'm wondering why why he thinks halfway through the... Let's see, I think place meeting might have actually been right. I don't do a whole lot of collision checking. Okay. Hey! Haha! Look at that. So you got a little guy with the hops. Haha. So you had a jumper. And then you could add, you could add accelerate. Oh wow. You could add acceleration so that he doesn't, just rise at a steady rate and fall at a steady rate. You could have it where, he takes off with an initial velocity, and every step, that velocity just decreases. And then eventually it becomes, downwards velocity, and then that accelerates. So, a game I was working on, Spirits of Kanji, I have that in there where your character jumps and falls much more realistically. But yeah, here's how you make a platformer, more or less, out of basic cubes. Okay, so let's see. Now let's cover rooms a little more. So there's a lot going on here. So you have like different layers where you have background and then you have instances. And then when you are making an object, you can set something called their depth, and you can give that some number. And deeper objects will render behind lower number / shallower objects, in case you want to have some sort of rendering priority. And then so there's depth, and then what happens is, so the sprite, this is image index 0. So if we made multiple colors here, and then close that, and then play the game, he'll just rapidly blast through all the different colors. Pop, 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 pop. It's like a little raven here. Okay. So what happens is, how you take care of that is there's some keywords. So you can say image speed equals 0. So that's actually per step. You set that here per step. How many frames do you want him to step through? So defaultly it would be, it's 1. If you don't say anything, image speed is 1. That means every frame he steps through one index in his sprite array. But if you set it to, point 03 or something like that, then check this out. He'll blink much slower, if at all. There we go. So now he just kind of rotates between the colors, and it's a much slower process. So you can set image speed. Depth, image speed, there's image index, where you can just straight up assign one. That's what I usually do. I set it to 0 for image speed, and then throughout game logic, I dynamically decide, hey, I want the index to be, 3. And then that will be yellow. So he has a depth of 1, image speed 0, image index 3. Yeah, so let's see. So we have the instances. They render on top of the background. These are all the instances that we kind of hard-coded into the map. In most of my games, I make a controller object that kind of dynamically spawns everything in, but for the sake of the tutorial, this works. This drag and drop level builder is, like I say, it's super useful for if you're like actually designing levels for like a single player campaign or something. That's really nice. This is where you can set a lot of the properties of the room. You can set whether you let's see, you can set the width and height of the room in terms of pixels. So for now, I usually just do 1920 by 1080 to match my HD monitor. Let's see. Let's close a lot of these. There we go. Oh, well, let's actually check out. You can mess around with views. I prefer to do those dynamically with the controller, so you can pan a camera around. There's room physics. It's better to have your own physics. Just learn how to program some of those, like dynamic lighting and stuff. Doing everything dynamically is a few more lines of code, but it's much cleaner and better to do for yourself. Let's see, notes. This is where you can add instructions for the gamer to play. Included files. This is pretty obvious. This is if you want to attach any text files or something that you might use for storing data that you read or write to, something like that. Then you have your options here, where you can mess around with. Let's see. I usually don't touch any of this. I source control for some of my other games. Oh, that's cool. You can have little add-on things. Okay, so in Windows, this is where you can make your project version. You can have you can crank out company, product, a bunch of legal stuff. This is a texture page where if you all your images are kind of stuck on one big image, and then they're kind of scanned off of it as they're used. And so if all of your collective assets take up more space than the size of your texture page, what'll happen is that means there's now multiple texture pages. And if you render one thing from one page and one thing from another page at the same time, your computer every frame has to flip back and forth between those texture pages, and that gives horrible performance. So I usually defaultly set that as maximum as I can, because that takes a lot of memory, but it's very stagnant, and so you sacrifice a little bit of RAM for enormous processor gains. So that's what I do. This is where you can set your little icon and stuff down here, and your splash screen, all for if you make custom stuff. And then an installer. So that's pretty cool. Let's see. Oh, okay, well. Okay, so configurations, options, extensions. Let's see. That generally covers everything. It's a pretty quick, simple 2D engine. what you mainly need to look at is if you go to, I think it's, if you go to this, if you go to docs2.yoyogames.com and you go to search, you can literally search up anything you want. So you're like, hey, how do I make lists in Game Maker Studio? Type in list. And they call them DS lists. So, oh, you can look up create list. Oh, that might not be the best. It's like a drag and drop thing. Let's just do DS lists. Cool. So this is kind of like in Python when you make lists. But here, instead of like in Python where you have basic like brackets or whatever, here you actually have to say like my list equals DS list create. And then this is how you add to it. You would say you do DS list add and then the name of your list, and then you can put an X number of values that you want to append to it. A boolean for if it's empty, that'll return the length. If you have a value in mind and you want the index of it, you call this function, or vice versa. If you want the value at a certain index, you call this. This is how you can replace a value, so you can copy it over. So all the data structures, there's queues, stacks, maps, a bunch of your basic data structures. I'm not going to go into detail about shaders or anything, that's later on. But, yeah, so if you have any questions, you can ask me or you can come here. This is a great reference. So, so by the end of this, you should have a nice little platformer where you can kind of hop around with your yellow square. Okay, thanks for watching.